Hello there. Welcome back to the Garuda Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the first episode, and today's episode is a little bit special. I received the opportunity to interview a pilot who has been flying for more than 2 decades. My next guest here is Captain Geetanjali Khadria, who currently flies the mighty Boeing 787 for Air India. We will briefly be talking about her career, her time at flying school, what it feels to fly the Boeing 787, and her advice to young aviators. I hope you enjoy the next episode in this series, and I hope you continue to watch various episodes of the Garud podcast. Let's begin.
First of all, let me also thank you for all those lovely things that you said about me. I would like to also compliment you, Aman, that to follow your instinct and to reach out, and it's not, I'm sure, I believe million hit that little thing reel got, but not maybe less than 100 people would respond the way you have. So
Yeah,
I think that is credit to you as well. And I think it was really remarkable how you made contact and how you persevered and how well you thought it all out. And I am certain that in days to come, that Garud will become a go-to place for new people joining into aviation and welcoming them with open arms. So thank you once again.
thank you. Thank you.
About your question to me about how I started, the beauty is that whoever I meet, mostly boys and many girls, everybody tells me that it was their childhood dream. It was their childhood dream. And I feel that makes me feel two things. Sometimes very fortunate that mine was able to be realized. And another second reaction sometimes I find is prayerful because life is very long. You can do it even now. So it's not like, okay, you dreamed it in your childhood, but you can't do it in your adulthood. So it's
Yeah,
possible at all times. For me, it started as um, I think, more merely as a fascination that starts for everybody at that age, I suppose. I was absolutely tiny baby living in Assam, in the eastern part of India. And in those days, there were not many trains. So the only mode of transport was either by road or by air. And across the Brahmaputra, uh, there was not even a bridge. So any relatives who were living across the Brahmaputra, you would either go by ferry or you would go by air. So as a young child, I was exposed to a lot of air travel. And also, I must say that my family would allow me to travel unaccompanied a lot. Uh,
yeah,
you know what that means? You know how you have babies traveling
yeah,
by
yeah.
themselves. And in those days, when security was not such a big issue, it used to be uh, free. Like she'd put me in the cockpit and she'd say, "Okay, I'm doing my work. Please sit." And she'd fill my pockets with sweets, and it was really exciting. And I would love it. And the captains were so nice, and I'd wear their caps and sit in the cockpit, like as if it was
Yeah,
always a very friendly and very familiar place it had become for me. And I think it started initially by saying that I'll be a cabin crew because they were so
yeah,
nice and they were so gentle and they were so friendly. And then I said, okay, you need to be pretty, and I'm very pretty, and some nonsense like that. But ultimately, I think it became that it began to realize that I think it would be, and with my father egging me on to say that it's better to become a doctor than to become a nurse. So why don't you think about? Although I came from a business family and my parents were from rural vernacular India, but yes, I must say that uh, there is it's never too small a place for big dreams, and I think he and I dreamed it together, and that's how it started. I was like, I think 8 years old when I started saying so, and then I
okay.
was
Yeah,
studying across the country in a boarding school
mhm,
in Rajasthan. So we were going back and forth again in aeroplanes 4 times a
yeah,
year, and traveling by ourselves. It became such a place that I knew all the crew traveling back and forth, and we
mhm,
pilots back.
mhm,
So it became a really familiar place. Yeah, so
okay.
that's how it started, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think airplanes are like something very fascinating for young children, so it must have stuck with you for sure. Yeah.
Uh, that I think
Yeah.
it was more the people that attracted me
Okay.
because I didn't know anything about
Yeah.
aeroplanes at all.
Okay. Yeah.
There's the Airbus. I used to think it will be a bus that will fly or something like
Okay.
that. I
Yeah.
had no idea because those were not the days of the internet. I was living in a small village. We didn't know. I didn't know. I think it had to do, the attraction had to do with the people. You know,
Yeah.
people were very friendly, very inviting, very welcoming. And I think
Mm.
that's what fascinated me. And also, I was very good at doing things with my hands. So I learned to
Yeah.
drive at a very young age. I can't say what age because it was illegal.
Mm.
I was roller skating. I was biking. Like I like to do things with my hands, and I think flying was one of those automatic progressions. So yeah,
Okay. So, the next kind of question I have is, so like as a senior pilot now, like do you often instruct or train junior pilots? And like if you have, how's that experience been training young
yeah,
pilots? Like,
um, yeah. So thank you for asking that question. I do think that um, either you are a designated trainer
mm,
and you can also impart training without being a designated trainer if you have that bent of mind, what we call pedagogical bent of mind. So yeah, I think generally as a person I'm quite pedagogical in my ways. So
yeah,
I found myself being almost like counselor to my first officers and everything when I was flying. I'm very pedagogical with everyone I meet, whoever
yeah,
needs anything. So that uh, long before I think I officially became a trainer, and I met so many captains who were not trainers but were better trainers than designated trainers. So
yeah,
yeah, the thing is that we know, right? We know so many teachers in school who are not really interested in teaching, and there are some teachers who are extraordinary because
yeah,
of what they bring and what they are willing to share and give, and are praying for your progress as much as yourself. So again, I told you it's all about the people. So for me,
yeah,
whatever I learned from whoever, and and I learned what not to be as well. you know,
yeah,
that it is
yeah,
not about the position. It is not, oh, when I become a trainer, then I will train,
yeah,
or I've become a trainer now. What, it's not. It's
yeah,
not.
sure.
It's but the airlines have to do. Yeah, so I was a trainer on the Airbus fleet
Yeah,
when I was flying. Those were narrow body fleets when I was flying domestic.
yeah,
I transitioned to a wide body aircraft right now for the last 6 years. And here I'm a line pilot. I'm not a trainer yet. That's because of the process of the airline and the red tapeism. But
yeah,
yeah, I might
yeah.
as well be.
Yeah, I think the previous guest I had, like the first guest I had, I think he was also a flight instructor, but I'm not exactly sure what aircraft he also flew, but yeah, he enjoyed his time as an instructor too.
Yes,
So yeah.
yes, yes. If you
Um,
if you like to teach, you will enjoy it. If you
yeah,
do not like to teach, you will find it burdensome. So it
yeah, for
depends
sure.
on what you bring to the table and what is your bent of mind.
Yes, yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And so you kind of mentioned previously what you were flying the Airbus fleet, I think, before, and
Yeah.
so and now you're flying the 787. So do you have like a favorite between the two, or is it like you prefer the 787 over the Airbus fleet? Like,
Um, you know, I get asked this question so
yeah,
often, and the thing is that as pilots, you do your job at your best, no matter what you're given, right?
yeah,
Even if you're given a
yeah,
broken plane, you will try and do your
yeah,
best, right?
yeah,
So it's hard to pick. It actually, one should not pick favorites because then you're living in the past. Suppose say my favorite was the previous one, then what?
yeah,
Then it's not
yeah,
fair on this
yeah,
aeroplane.
yeah,
So, but the thing is that you can observe differences, you can appreciate differences, you may even wish that, oh my God, that this may become like that or that may become like this one. So each aeroplane has, some things are better than this one and some things are better in this one. So as a captain, I think one must observe rather than actually pick a favorite. And I actually made that mistake because I flew the
Oh,
Airbus for so many years,
yeah,
and it was almost like a hangover. I was flying the Boeing, but I was only thinking of the Airbus.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the truth is that it's very hard to pick favorites, you know.
yeah,
But also, I would imagine that, in my understanding, if I were to just pick and say that the Airbus, I found that the software was uh, supreme, like superior,
yeah,
and on
yeah.
the Boeing, I found that the hardware is superior. You
Okay,
know,
okay,
it's a
yeah,
very sturdy machine, you know, and
yeah,
all it's I'm flying airplanes that are almost 10 years old, but you can't tell the age of the airplanes. They're very
yeah,
hardy,
yeah.
very sturdy machines. And on the Airbus, it was almost like I was flying that aeroplane with thought power, because that aeroplane can
Okay,
think,
yeah,
thinking, you know. It was
yeah.
the software was superb. So I think airplanes are beautiful. Everyone has but yeah, I would say that I think software attracts me more.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah,
So to
yeah.
answer
I've
your question, I'm giving it to you.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I've just heard or I've just read on the internet like I've some people have said like the Airbus has like a better fly-by-wire system compared to the Boeing aircraft. So yeah,
No,
yeah,
the Boeing also has fly-by-wire. Now all
okay,
aeroplanes are
yeah,
fly-by-wire.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, but I think the inventor was Airbus,
okay,
and that's what brought down the weight and brought down the economy. I mean, better economy and better handling. All of that it was introduced, so it's credited to Airbus. But now all planes fly by wire.
oh, okay, yeah. And so I was kind of asking this to my previous guest. So, like every pilot has certain memories from flying school that they may not forget. Could you briefly maybe talk about your time at flight school? Do you have any memories from flying school before you became a pilot? Or
I have many memories from flying school and
okay,
very good ones at that.
yeah,
Um, I, the most, I don't know how to, I'll just tell you a little bit in a nutshell. Um, I don't know if you've heard of the Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Udan Academy here in
yeah,
Bombay, in India. Yeah, it was
yeah,
established by Rajiv Gandhi, and it was the most prestigious flying club to go to. And you had to be a PPL holder before you went there. So I
yeah,
went to Ahmedabad to do my PPL in order to go to IGRUA,
yeah,
and but all my papers were passed, uh, and Ahmedabad had so many aeroplanes, and IGRUA used to take really long. So I hung out in Ahmedabad and finished my entire flying in less than a year. In fact, actually eight
okay,
months. You know,
yeah,
when I joined the flying club, I was probably the youngest over there. Um, and there were many girls and boys, and we used to have this big tempo traveler that they had given to the
yeah,
students, which actually never didn't have a driver and never had any fuel.
yeah,
And
yeah,
because I said I learned to drive at a young age, I was the only one who would drive it, and the others would push it because we'd run out of fuel. And then,
yeah,
so it was a really fun time in the flying club. And we had an American instructor, American CFI at that time, and
yeah,
he would give the first solos. And there was some tradition when somebody got a first solo or got PPL or something like that, they would roll him in a mud pit, like a complete. And
yeah,
that was my first day there. I was like, what are we doing? But it was a real celebration of the
yeah.
sort, you know. Yeah, it was a fun time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you just kind of talked about like your first solo. Sorry, like first solo. Do you remember what it was like being alone in that
Oh
airplane the
yes.
first time?
Oh yes. Yes, I do actually. Those were summer days in Ahmedabad, so the eddies but
Yeah,
I had a really good instructor, and within a week of flying, uh, I was given first solo, and I remember he would make you do circuits, and it was basically
yeah,
he's just trying to gauge you, and then suddenly he said, "Okay, stop, stop," and he got off the runway on the runway, and he said, "Go, do a circuit and come." And I could see him. I took off, and I was on the downwind, and I could see him standing there at the side of the runway. And
yeah,
yeah, you do a circuit and you come, and you're like, wow. And it felt lighter, the aeroplane felt lighter. But actually, I can remember feeling great joy, great joy. It was,
Okay.
thank you for reminding me, I'd forgotten about it. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. It was a great joyful moment. Yeah.
Okay. Which was the like last destination you flew to, and like what do you typically like to do in a layover after long haul flights? Like,
You mean now, currently?
yeah, yeah, currently.
Yeah, okay. I just came back from London the night before last. Um, it was cold.
Okay.
I what I like to do on layovers. It depends a lot on how I'm feeling, what the destination is like, what my first officer is like. It's a very variable thing. So I like to do variable things. It's not a pre-planned thing that I like to do. So
Mm,
on a nice day, I'd like to go for a walk. On an even better day, we like to go and watch some shows, or go for a tour if you're in a new place for the first time. It's like every time you go to Rome, every time you're not going to go and see the Colosseum,
yeah,
you see it once or twice. So the thing about our job is, because you go to places repeatedly, you get an opportunity to do different things.
yeah,
And like, I'm going to Bangkok next. I'm looking forward to the food.
yeah,
So it's different times, different places. Mostly, I find that I like to be on my own. I like to read a lot. I practice my meditations. I like to ponder. I like to be in nature. So yeah, I really enjoy the varied flora and fauna of different places we get an opportunity to go to.
yeah.
So
Mm,
yeah, that's how it's exciting, because every time it's new and every
yeah,
time it's different. Yeah,
yeah. I think my
get pretty
dad
monotonous
recently,
otherwise, wouldn't it? It
yeah,
would get pretty monotonous otherwise, wouldn't it?
yeah, yeah. And so I think my dad recently flew the 787 from Seoul, I think Seoul to Delhi. I'm not sure. I think it was like a few weeks ago. So, yeah. My next question for you was just so you mentioned briefly that you were like an Airbus pilot for so many years, and so Air India has had like a very historic fleet. So it had like the Airbus A300, the Boeing 707, the early generations of the 747, and so basically, like, I'm presuming most of the aircraft which were kind of flown before, like they had like analog instruments and maybe perhaps less glass screens. And now Air India has a very modern fleet, and it has placed orders for even more technologically advanced aircraft. So, like, how has your job kind of changed as a pilot in terms of like flight operations or managing, or has it remained the same, or has there been any like changes like that? Or
See, since I started flying directly on the Airbus 320 fleet, on the jets, I've actually only flown glass cockpit.
okay,
Uh,
okay,
so the generation before mine, they flew the Boeing 737s, which was analog and non-fly-by-wire. And on the wide body side, the 300, which was and the jumbos, the old jumbos, which were also non-analog and non-fly-by-wire. Um, from my generation onwards, I joined Air India in 2001, and the Airbus aircraft came in the 90s. So I have only flown the glass cockpit. However, what I find the changes is not so much in terms of instrumentation as much as it is on, again, human uh, collaboration. How in the olden days it was like the captain would say what has to be done, and the co-pilot would do it in servitude, or it was, the introduction and the implementation of the procedures for better CRM, for better accident records, for better safety. Those things changed a lot more, because then they had the time and the energy to do that. Because when you're otherwise in analog instruments, your attention so much more on the actual doing of it, whereas these glass cockpit and the auto thrust, etc., took away that physical load of yours. So you
yeah,
had more time to look at the soft aspects of the cockpit.
yeah,
and you had more time to monitor your instruments. You had at least, like I said, it's like you hire staff in your house, or vis-a-vis, you do all the work yourself. So
yeah,
when you hire staff, you are still monitoring the staff. So
yeah,
the autopilot and the FMS and the autothrust, they're all doing the work. Your That's why we were now then called cockpit managers, because you are more or less managing your people, you're managing your resources, you're managing your time, you're managing your weather,
yeah, yeah,
those things. So that's what I think flying essentially changed when it became glass cockpit. It became
yeah,
more of managing the show rather than physically
yeah,
doing that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And so like kind of about that, like Air India has placed orders for like even more technologically aircraft now, like the 777X and the Boeing 737 Max. So you're now a wide body pilot. Are you excited for these aircraft to come into the fleet, or and maybe
Uh,
fly them, or
Actually, I think my excitement started from the time the talk of privatization happened. You know,
okay, okay,
uh,
yeah,
that because finally there was going to be a professionally managed large scale airline in our country. Uh,
yeah,
Also because now that they have determined that our diaspora is so large, how many of our lovely countrymen live in foreign countries, who travel back and forth, whose families travel back and forth. And we were running an airline which was smaller than would support the population of Vietnam, actually,
mm,
And
mhm,
so we didn't have an airline of scale to match. The joke was that Emirates was the national carrier of India,
yeah,
because they were operating to
mm,
every nook and corner. They were carrying all our passengers back and forth, because Air India was not servicing the routes, was not set up to service the routes. So,
yeah,
what this private company has done, has realized the potential. See, we are geographically so beautifully placed that the east and the west is on both sides. Secondly, our population travels considerably. So even if 1% of our population travels, that's still 1 crore, 1.5 crore people, which is much more than entire populations of other countries.
mm,
So
yeah,
the potential is extraordinary. Not only that, the new generation of India is very exploratory, and we didn't have any direct flights to destinations where we wanted to go directly. It always had to be via Emirates or Singapore Airlines. So that will give us great access. And it's not like Singapore or Dubai, which is one city. We are such
mm,
a large nation that every city would like to have direct connection. So I
yeah,
should be able to fly to Singapore directly from Nagpur and from Ahmedabad and from Jaipur, rather than just even Delhi and Bombay. So
yeah,
the scale of our country is so large that I don't think that even the current
mm,
order they've placed is also
yeah,
actually might turn out to be less, because can you
yeah,
imagine every station flying everywhere? It would be great, like how
yeah,
you have in the
yeah,
US, right? Like
yeah,
every station has all international flights. You can fly to
yeah,
anywhere directly from Atlanta. You can fly to anywhere from,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that's what I
yeah,
mean. That's how they aim to be. So, yes, it is something very exciting. I almost feel like I am in the midway of my career, where I've seen that, and now I get an opportunity to see this,
yeah,
and it's marvelous.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it was quite historic of them, or significant. Like it was all over the news, like the biggest aircraft order in history. Um, and so one question I had was so I'm were you about the Vande Bharat mission. So it was like a massive rescue operation conducted by all airlines, and Air India had a very significant role. So how was it like being a pilot during this major operation of rescuing people overseas?
Um, yeah, it was an actually very emotional time. Um, you know, Let me also just say that not all
Yeah,
airlines were doing rescue missions. There
yeah,
were countries who refused to do it.
Yeah.
So yes, it is very, and Air India historically has always been very benevolent in doing national service in any kind of disaster or any kind of rescue operations in the past. The government has always called upon Air India, and Air India has always responded. Okay, so
Yeah.
firstly, saying that that was an extraordinary thing, which we always do. Secondly, for pilots, it was also an emotional time because an absolute shutdown of aeroplanes and flying altogether in the beginning, which is hard for anyone in the aviation industry to watch because traditionally we know that even 1 hour of the aeroplane extra on ground is a loss to the airline,
Yeah.
and here we were just completely grounded. So it was a painful time for individuals in aviation because you didn't know, it was uncertainty whether we will ever fly again, whether the industry will last again, whether the airline will last again. Lots of um, uncertainty was there. So yes, individually everybody was feeling what everybody was feeling. Then they got this opportunity to do the Vande Bharat mission, which was about 5 or 6 weeks into the lockdown that they started flying again. And it was a marvelous thing because they called on the pilots and everybody came, despite the fears, despite the family risks,
Yeah.
despite all of that. And the airline took extraordinary measures to ensure that we were safe, to give us that. It was an extraordinary time, I must tell you. And we actually also lost many pilots to COVID, you know,
Oh.
um, and crew. So yes, but then extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. So and then people showed up. Yes, for many years we did it where we were flying throughout and all over the world. Whether I remember on 11th of March, actually, I was in Milan when Air Italia had shut down all their flights and we were still doing, and we were bringing our
Okay.
passengers back. And that was the last flight that we did before the lockdown happened.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've just
And
seen like a
Milan was
couple
the
of
hub.
videos.
Milan, the hub was the hub of the start of COVID.
Okay. Yeah.
Started there. Yeah.
Yeah. I've just seen like a few videos where like, the cabin crew were like wearing these big PPE suits and taking, bringing the passengers on board. So, and so we've kind of briefly talked about this before, just about like fly-by-wire and glass cockpits, but um so like I'd like to I asked my previous guest as well about this, about like their views on artificial intelligence and aviation. And um so like every manufacturer has been trying to integrate AI into their aircraft. And like one AI system which kind of fascinates me on the 787 is the gust suppression system. What is your opinion on AI within modern aircraft?
I think I think you mean by automation.
Yeah.
Um, the thing is that the automation is extremely helpful and it's very ingenious and it's very well thought out and it's very well laid out as long as it can be controlled by someone.
Yeah.
The moment the automation is without any control or any authority and one doesn't know about it, like what happened on the 737 MAX,
Yeah.
that's problematic. So yes, I mean, I feel that the more automation, the easier it is. But at the same time, the current recurrent training of the pilots and of the crew who is handling that automation should supplement the automation itself. You
Yeah.
know, it's like same thing. If you hired staff and you're not monitoring them, and if
Yeah.
you're not feeding them information, and if you're not issuing the instructions, and then they will do what they want, when they want,
Yeah.
how they want, then how is that going to work?
Yeah. Okay.
Then that's not optimization of the automation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And um So, I think so. You've been flying for more than 20 years, and I'm just curious, how have safety procedures or how has safety training changed over the years? And um, oftentimes I just hear pilots saying, "I need to understand the airplane before taking any action when handling an emergency." So, how has safety training changed, and could you maybe briefly explain what it means to understand an airplane before handling an emergency?
So there are two different things, safety and emergency, and I mean you're referring to them as the same thing. Uh, you need to be safe even when you don't have an emergency, right?
Yeah,
Like safety does not only mean being safe during an emergency.
yeah,
Safety also means every day, day to day, right?
yeah,
Even when I don't have an emergency. So,
yeah.
and if you are safe, you will avoid any emergency, right? If you are,
Correct.
safety is an attitude, safety is a way of life. And if you live your life like that, it's like, for example, if you have always lived your life and you've managed your finances and if you've saved your money and if you're not overspending, will you have to ever worry about a downturn or like economic slowdown of the world or anything like that? Will that ever affect you? Or even if you have a bad miss of something, will it affect you? Not as much as, because you have incorporated that lifestyle uh, on an everyday basis. So even if you have suppose say one bad incident, suppose you lost some money in a business, but because you've had a consistent way of life of saving money. So it's the same thing about flying. If you have a habit of being safe, if you practice safety in your day-to-day procedures, if you are disciplined in your day-to-day SOPs and how much you follow it, the emergency will be an absolute cakewalk. And that's what the practice is when they simulate the emergencies in the simulator training. When you practice emergencies before every takeoff, you are telling yourself and reminding your parasympathetic nervous system that you know how to do this. So when it actually happens, it will just be your simulation playing out, because your brain can't tell the difference between simulation and action.
Yeah,
It will function in the exact same way as how you practiced it.
yeah,
Do you
yes,
understand? And when we react with emotion, when we react with fear, when we react with surprise or startlement, or so those will change the way we. So practice is everything, right? Practice
yeah,
makes perfect. So practice is the best way to be safe. Practice is the best way to handle emergencies, and then you do your best. That's what it is. you know
okay.
Even if you have lost both engines and you're going to crash, you still do your best,
Mm.
like it happened to Sully.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah, yeah, it was quite fascinating. Like, I've seen the movie many times, so the movie's very good. Yeah.
Yes.
And so as a captain, you're the key decision maker for that respective flight. And which part of the flight is the most important to you? Is it just ensuring the flight leaves on time, or is it the end of the flight? Which part is the most important to you?
um I just want to go back to what we were talking before. I had a thought and I should share with you. What I was trying to say was that when you have practiced your maneuvers, those actions come by memory. Okay, your muscle memory will come in, and when your emotion is down, that's when you will be able to have more clarity in what to do next. Okay, when you react with emotion and fear, there is a cloud of doubt, and you're not able to determine your previous actions. Hence, Captain Sully, despite having the worst situation, he was able to do maneuvers which are not practiced, which are not taught, because he didn't react with an emotion, and he was able to
Yeah,
determine what is the best way possible. So those
yeah,
things come from self-management, self-awareness. How I handle my emotions is up to me, isn't it? And how many people, even though your training and my training are different, I mean, the same training, but you and I will react differently. That will depend on how we handle our emotions. Hence, it is so important to be able to do some kind of self-management, as in some awareness of self-awareness as to how we react, which is my stuck point, what is my tendency, and then try to overcome that. In fact, I'm trying to propose here that the company should help us do that, because if we leave it to the individual, how many people do it? You know,
Yeah.
so that was that. Your second question was about which part is my favorite part, or which part
No,
will
like
give importance to.
yeah, like which is the most important to you as a
See,
captain?
these things are not up to the individual, they're determined by the company, right? So, and also a pilot, because a pilot is like a manager, has to play all roles, right? So
Yeah.
I am also the executor and the purposeful point that, what happens on time is my job. Paperwork is done, administrative properly is also my job. To be able to creatively solve problems is also my job. To be able to interact with crew and passengers and everybody, that is also my job. So there are lots of jobs, but at different times you have to play different roles. If you mismanage the roles, that also might, it's like when I come into the uh, airport for briefing, that's my time to be administrative and to do paperwork. But there, if I decide to meet people and talk to people, then this might miss out. So you have to be able to manage your roles at different times. Secondly, it's also the company that tells you what it gives importance to. So the company will
Yeah.
tell you they give importance to on-time performance. The company will tell you it gives importance to discipline. The company will tell you it gives importance to paperwork. So the culture of the company is also determines how you will ultimately function. And so what I like to do is when I come into for briefing, I'm mindful of doing what I'm supposed to do. So not to forget to do your breath analyzer, to do your paperwork, pay attention to the details, get your paperwork properly. Once you're in the cockpit, that time it's action time. So like, okay, take the clearance, take the weather, check the thing. So that's all action oriented, So that time I'm not chit chatting and chai coffee and all that doesn't happen. Then once you're airborne, then you meet people, then you talk to, this and that, all of that. Then once you have an emergency, and that's when you become creative and trying to, okay, now let me see what can I do? How do I solve this? What can I do? What are my options? What are my, so different times, different roles,
Yeah.
and uh, and you have to play all of it all the time.
Yeah.
So one cannot choose, and if you are choosing, then something else is suffering, you know,
Sure.
optimally.
Yeah. 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 Uh I think yeah, I mean it's kind of like you have to be very quick be very quick based on what you're telling me. So
Yeah, no, no,
um
it's not an
I
action.
yeah,
It is not about speed at
yeah,
all. They say
yeah,
that it should be um, determined action. Actually, don't do anything in a hurry.
yeah,
You're not
okay.
falling out of the sky anytime.
Yeah, of course. And so I kind of wanted to talk about the aircraft you fly almost every day. And so like we were briefly just talking about the gust suppression system. So it's kind of I think it's called like the turbulence dampening system. And like the 787 has a bunch of sensors to kind of help detect changes in air pressure, angular velocity, and then like the airplane's computers like simultaneously processing all this information to kind of create the counter movements. What is your favorite aspect or feature of the 787 when you fly it every day?
I said to you that generally I find that the hardware in this
Yeah,
aircraft is
yeah,
really
that's
superb.
good.
So what they've done,
Yeah,
what as a pilot, what I am amazed is the amount of redundancy this aircraft has in every system. So nothing fails. Your both engines will fail and you still have the autopilot.
yeah,
So
okay,
the redundancy is extraordinary, firstly. Secondly, I find that like because this aircraft is so sturdy and she is so beautifully, cleanly designed that she refuses to descend or slow down because she is such a beautiful aerofoil, you know. Uh, that. Thirdly, another thing for very good for passengers as well is that they maintain a very nice um, cabin comfort, that the differential pressure is very less. So the cabin altitude is very low compared to others. So you know how you
yeah,
fly high altitude and you get more tired? In this
yeah,
aircraft, despite we fly much higher physical altitudes, the cabin
yeah,
altitude they've managed to keep very low. So they've designed the pressurization also in such a way that it's so subtle that you will not realize, but you will not feel as tired.
yeah,
And another thing that they have introduced is something called the NGS and the humidifiers. So basically, in air in high altitude, there is not enough moisture in the air, and so the dryness also makes you tired. And they have
yeah,
something called an nitrogen generation system, and also the humidifiers, which completely change the cabin atmosphere, the cabin temperature, the cabin humidity. So the experience to fly a 787 in the cabin as well as the cockpit is really very, very nice. And for cockpits, it is the noise is incredibly low. Like the engines, you can't even hear them. So, that is also very calming. So generally, overall experience of flying the aeroplane is very pleasant because it's very easy on the body compared to the other aeroplanes.
okay. And so we talked it like it's on the contrary, what do you think is like the most challenging aspect of flying the 787? Is it
I think the software is
yeah,
challenging
okay,
because,
okay,
when you fly an Airbus, you are spoiled because that aeroplane does everything on its own, and it's thinking it and is doing it. And this aeroplane is needs a lot of hand holding and walking. And the moment you look away and you haven't done that, and it will.
yeah,
So there is a lot of scanning, a lot of presence. Basically, it's like a child who is high maintenance and a child
yeah,
who is, automatic functions, So the Boeing I find is a little bit high maintenance that requires constant attention and constant
yeah,
handholding and constant monitoring and constant intervention, whereas the Airbus does everything as you
yeah,
want it on its own.
okay, okay. And so at the start of this podcast, I mentioned like you have your own blog and you kind of talk about your experiences that you have as a pilot and you talk about other things. So like you kind of also talk about like how like sort of lessons about how one can approach life and you kind of connect the two. How are you able to correlate the two? It's very interesting how you're kind of able to connect your experiences as a pilot with like life lessons and stuff like that.
Um, Thank you for asking that question, Aman. I don't consciously do it. It just comes to me.
Okay.
Did I first tell you that, when you say you have pedagogical bent of mind, you see everything with that way, that what have I learned and how can I make that a little bit better for somebody else with that knowledge and experience. So it comes from, I think, a point of wanting to share, being generous, being wanting to teach, etc. That's, I think, it starts from there. Second of all, I don't think we should separate our personal and our professional lives in a way that, how this can teach you that and that can teach you this. How you run your home can be how you entertain your guests at home, can be how you treat your passengers. How you discipline you are at work, maybe you can bring a little bit of discipline at home as well. So instead of living like a Jekyll and Hyde life, you try to incorporate them so that you don't feel lost over there or out of place over here. And uh, once I find that if you are an open vessel and if you are of a learning bent of mind, you will find every situation teaches you, you know,
Yeah.
and you
Sure.
are and you start noticing things and you start observing things. uh, Usually we are always talking. When you're talking, you're not listening or observing. When we start observing, and that's when. Uh, so I think in my case, I read a lot, so there is a lot of input there. I meditate, so there is a lot of input there, which is not words. It's almost divine. There is a observe people a lot. So there is, so the more you take in, the more you will be able to, you have something to play around with and process. And I think that's, it really is something that I'm not conscious of. It, it's,
Mhm.
it's a gift, I suppose, and I'm
Okay.
thankful for it.
And so, like I'm pretty sure you've been asked this question numerous times, but my final question for you is, what kind of advice would you want to give to young aviators or other people who are maybe considering to apply to flying school or who want to consider becoming an aviator?
Yeah, you're right. I do get asked that a lot, and I consider my journey and my uh, own process to be Destiny's child. You know, and every single thing and every single person who I encountered in the beginning of my years said not to do it because there were no jobs, etc. But so it's, nobody should tell you what to do. In fact, one of the captains, he told me don't fly, and afterwards, I got the job in the airline and I flew with his as his co-pilot, and he apologized to me. He says, Gitanjali, I'm so happy you didn't take my advice. Because
Yeah.
the thing is that one never knows what is in your destiny. So it should never be that because somebody said to do it and to not do it, right? I
Yeah.
know so many people who've done lawyers degrees and now have nothing to do with law because you did something that somebody told you to do. So it should never be that, first of all.
Yeah.
And if there is something that tells you that you want to do it, you should definitely do it, and the reasons should be right. And I also say this, and many people ask me this, that corruption happens and pilots think no end of themselves, or doctors are corrupt or lawyers are corrupt. I say, it's not the profession that is corrupt or profession that is the problem. It is the individual character that counts, right? So you can be a politician and you can still be noble, and you can be a priest and be still be corrupt.
Yeah.
So it depends on your individual moral characteristic. So if you are able to recognize your character flaws, which everyone has, and you work towards them, if you're able to recognize that what are the reasons that you want to do what you want to do, what are your intentions. So if you're coming into flying because you think you'll earn a lot of money, or you're coming into flying because you think there'll be lots of girls, or you're coming into flying because you think there'll be great destinations, uh, those are fine, but those cannot be the only reasons, because it is hard
Yeah.
work. It's a big, your body takes a beating, you have to be disciplined, you have to study a lot, you have to sacrifice a lot. Your social life suffers, your family suffers, there is a lot that you have to give in order to get. So one has to be very certain that why are we doing this? Because how long will you do something for money? You'll get bored of it.
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah.
You know. So money can't be the only motivation. Girls can't be the only motivation. There has to be something. So I would say that if you are able to determine and decide what gets you excited, what gets you, and you know what, you can, after 20 years you decide you don't like it, do something else. That's fine too. Life is very long. Now you have an opportunity to do multiple things. Why should we only do one thing? Like I started by saying that people who said it was their childhood dream, you can do it now.
Yeah.
It's all right. You just your reflexes might be a little slow, but you'll do it.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
good part is, in the second part of your life, you're not doing anything for money, right?
Yeah.
After having worked for 20, 25 years, you're set. You do what you like for the
Yeah.
joy of it. So, yes, so
Correct.
my
Correct.
long answer to a short question would be that any and everybody is welcome to fly. It's a joyous thing. But yes, it comes with certain agreements that you must make to yourself, that you will put your best foot forward, that you will have to, and it's the best to do your job in the most disciplined fashion. Otherwise you can be an indisciplined pilot, but you'll have to pay heavily for it, right?
Yeah. Correct. Correct.
So those are the things that if you have that bent of mind, then yes, very much so.
Okay. Sure.
So character building, very important.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, those are all the those are all the questions I had for you. So thank you, Gitanjali, for coming on the Garud podcast and Thank you for supporting it as this channel is still in its infancy. But yeah, thank you.